the NFL Network's Mike Garafolo, Eitan Shander.
Yeah.
Nick Foles and the Jaguars have mutual interest.
Uh-oh.
Mutual interest.
What do you think of that?
I don't know, but McMullen will explain to us, as he usually does, why, that could be more difficult than it seems. Like Nick might say, yeah, I like Jacksonville, but Jacksonville, you've said this before, Jacksonville's got some interesting issues here, but
some cap issues.
They have no cap space right now. They can create some room with some cuts that are expected, and we will get into some possible cuts coming up right now with John McMullen here on the Sports Bash Live on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. And, John, this is the first we've really heard, like, Nick Foles might have some interest in going somewhere. He has seemed pretty close to the vest at teams he would be interested, and Jacksonville's name keeps coming up. It keeps coming up. Now, Eitan had said, well, guess what? They got a lot of cap issues down there, but I've always kind of conceded that doesn't matter in this league. People figure out ways to get you there. If Jacksonville wants them, it sounds like Foles would be interested in going there now.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Mike's report, and I put that in quotes, it was really just sort of off-the-cuff stuff on the NFL Network, and he did what a lot of people have done and realized that John DeFilippo is now there as the offensive coordinator. They need a quarterback. They've made the decision. They have to move on from Blake Bortles, and Nick is the best quarterback available, especially now that Joe Flacco's out of the mix. So, yeah, they're interested. So are the Giants. So are the Redskins. So are the Miami Dolphins, maybe even the Oakland Raiders. So those are the teams you're looking at. But clearly from the Eagles' perspective, they want to steer them outside the division. So they don't want them in New York. They don't want them in Washington. And for them, the best-case scenario would be steering him towards a team in another conference like Jacksonville.
Do you think that there is – I don't know if it's a lesser deal, John, but if you're Howie Roseman, would you rather get a fourth-round pick back from Jacksonville than a third-round pick next year from the Washington Redskins or New York Giants just to keep them out of the division?
Yeah, I think they would, yeah. I mean, I think that number one is to keep them out of the division because the last thing they want to see is Nick Foles twice a year. And if you really want to speculate with a team like the New York Giants, if they keep Odell Beckham and they have Saquon Barkley, that could get ugly real quick. So I think they want to avoid that. And it's going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult to get a fourth-round pick. It's going to be difficult to get a third-round pick. Maybe the best way to go is to get the compensatory pick and just let them walk as a free agency. If you're just looking for value, that's probably the easiest route.
But that could put him in New York or Washington, right?
Well, exactly. And so what I'm saying is if your only goal is to get the most value, well, then the compensatory route would be the easiest way to go. But I don't think that's their main goal at this point. I think their main goal at this point is to get them out of the division.
Would they prefer the pick in this year's draft or the compensatory pick, which wouldn't be awarded to you till next year's draft?
Yeah, I mean, obviously they gave up a third-round pick. But they can't – no one's going to give them a third-round pick for Nick Foles and then pay Nick Foles $25 million. I've said that from the get-go. You can never say never because there are dumb people who make dumb decisions. There are crazier things that have happened, but that's very unlikely. So if you're looking at pushing it off a year – that maybe is the way to go, and you have to just accept that fact if that was your lone goal, as I said, but I don't think it is. And, oh, by the way, I don't think people fully understand with compensatory picks, there's no guarantee the Eagles are getting a third-round pick if he signs elsewhere. Most people I've talked to said it's more likely to be a fourth-round pick, and it all has to do with the free agents you bring back as well as how much money Nick gets on the open market. So there's no guarantees from that standpoint as well.
Do you know when they award those picks? In other words, if Foles leaves in free agency before the draft, would they know their like? Could they use that pick as trade leverage in this year's draft? We were trying to figure that out beforehand before you came on.
No, the compensatory picks for this year's draft haven't been official yet. Haven't been made official yet. It's very late in the process. If somebody signs in free agency this year, say Nick gets to free agency, compensatory picks won't be known till April of next year. And it's only been, this is the second or third year that you can actually trade compensatory picks. But you won't know that till right before next year's draft. We still don't know the compensatory picks of this year's draft yet, officially.
So you wouldn't be able to trade that pick this year because you wouldn't know what it is.
Exactly.
John McMullen on the NFL. Yesterday we saw Flacco. Now, you're going to start seeing people getting released because they got to start shedding the cap, right? You already saw Pierre Garçon as a guy who was released, which could open the door, a lot of people think, for Antonio Brown, right? I mean, that you're connecting the dots with that?
Yeah, well, for one reason, I mean, they desperately needed a receiver no matter what. Even with Pierre Garçon, they need help at receiver. Then you speculate with Jimmy Garoppolo coming back. Everyone likes Kyle Shanahan, his offense. And Antonio's mentioned San Francisco himself a time or two and intimated that. So, yeah, they'd be one of the most logical places where he could land, but there's difficulties with that as well. And the fact that you have to trade for him and you have to pay him on top of it. So, obviously, Pittsburgh knows his value as a player, but his contract affects that as far as what are they willing to let him go for? Are they just going to say he's such a problem, we want him out of here, we'll take a 5th, 6th round pick, or are they going to play hardball?
Yeah, he's due to make less than $39 million over the next 3 years, so about $13 million. So it's a tradable contract. The question, I guess, John, is he going to come into your city and say, now I want to be paid a new contract?
Yeah, and that's always a possibility as well, because especially veterans who are in the later years of their contract, that means the guaranteed money is gone, in essence. So the first thing they always say is, I want stuff guaranteed up front, and understandably so. That's the way the NFL works, and that's why you see so many restructured deals. So when you see guys signing 5 and 5 years deals in free agency, generally all the guaranteed money is in the first 2 years, and you renegotiate from there. If they outperform and continue to play at a high level, you generally readjust and guarantee them more money. If not, you generally cut them.
John McMullen on the NFL. NFL.com listed a bunch of guys, John, who could be released here with the cap casualty stuff about to, open up here. A couple names on the Eagles. Let's start with one. Tim Jernigan. Is he a guy that you would see being released by Philadelphia? I thought that name was kind of interesting.
Well, yeah, if you remember when he hurt himself in a non-football injury, the Eagles renegotiated his deal because there was speculation that he might not be able to return. It was such a serious injury, ended up being a herniated disc, and he had neck surgery, and he was able to make it back. But they already redid his deal to the point that they can move forward. There's no more guaranteed money. So either way, if they want to bring him back, they have to restructure the contract. So one or the other. But some way, if the Eagles feel comfortable with Tim's health, they might want to bring him back, but it's going to be a whole new deal because they wanted to see what it was going to be health-wise. And if you remember that renegotiated deal, they guaranteed him essentially $3 million to stick around for 1 year, and then the Eagles can now walk away with no penalty.
John, a couple of names that I was curious about outside of Philadelphia. I know Vegas has some odds out now as far as where Antonio Brown's going to play. How do you see that playing out this offseason with Brown?
Well, we just mentioned San Francisco. I think that's the most likely place for him for a number of reasons. Jimmy Garoppolo is a quarterback, and San Francisco certainly has the space and the wherewithal to get a receiver, so that helps. He would like to play there, I think. But to me, the more important part of Antonio is that I don't see there's any way he's going to be back in Pittsburgh. So they have made the decision they have to move on, and it's going to be interesting from their standpoint. How do you lose playmakers like Brown and likely Le'Veon Bell in the same offseason?
Well, what about Odell Beckham Jr.? There was that Glazier report that came out saying that he doesn't anticipate Beckham being on the team come start of the season. Do you think the Giants move him?
Prediction, he said.
It is.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's more of a Pat Shurmur thing, and I think that's also off the field kind of stuff. Obviously, and that's why I mentioned when we talked about Nick Foles, I said Saquon Barkley and potentially Odell Beckham, because I think they're open to moving him, but I don't think it's a situation where it's guaranteed. Like I don't think Brown is going to be in Pittsburgh no matter what. I think in the case of OBJ, if they get a good deal and they feel the chemistry is better, I could see them moving on. If you think about back to the Giants before their first Super Bowl, and their stars offensively were Jeremy Shockey and Tiki Barber, and they moved on from those two players, and everybody was like, what are you doing? And it was chemistry issues. They weren't allowing Eli Manning to develop, and they sort of took a step back to take two steps forward. I think that's sort of the same mentality of potentially moving on from OBJ, because from a talent standpoint, you're not going to get better. So it's totally off the field stuff.
John, a couple other names. By the way, there was a couple other Eagles mentioned in here. We'll get to them in a minute, but we'll stay on the wide receiver, train. OBJ, Antonio Brown. What about Deshaun Jackson? Anytime there's a former Eagle that might be cut, it's always, hey, how about bringing him back? But you think Jackson is a guy that would still be yearned for on the free agent market? I mean, it seems that he's been around forever, but still has that speed skill set, but never seems to be healthy.
Yeah, I mean, I say it a lot. I think Eagles fans have to stop looking in the rearview mirror for once and start just looking through the front windshield and focus on the future, not the past. Now, while I say that, look, their most obvious need on the offensive side of the football is a deep threat outside the numbers, and that's the one thing Deshaun can still do at a high level, and he's one of the best ever at it. But I think you don't want to break the bank for a player, as you mentioned, who has had trouble staying healthy, whether it's just nagging injuries, and who is over the age of 30. So I do think you want to see how you can work free agency in the draft with younger players and maybe address the need that way. And if that doesn't come to fruition, maybe you sort of visit that. But I think Deshaun still produces at a level to where he's going to get a decent amount of money. And I'm not sure if I want to go down that road if I'm the Eagles.
Yeah. Well, one of the names they mentioned as a possible cut, Nelson Aguilar.
Yeah, and I kind of talked about that earlier this week. He's on this will be his fifth year in his rookie deal. So you got the big spike. It's just under $10 million. There's no way the Eagles want to pay Nelson Aguilar $10 million. He's a good slot receiver. But he's never had more than 800 yards in his first 4 years. That's not what you pay receivers $10 million for. So I think there's a good chance he'll be back, but it will be under an extension that lowers that number. There's no way the Eagles are going to pay Nelson Aguilar essentially $10 million.
Final name on that list, there were three Eagles. Jason Peters. And I know we've kind of touched on this a little bit, but Peters is an interesting one because, you know, a lot of people figure that he's at the end of the road, but you have mentioned many times in this segment on this show, John, that the relationship him and Doug has in their organization makes that difficult.
Yeah, not only Doug. I mean, Jeffrey Lurie. I don't think there is a player closer to the owner than Jason Peters. So that puts it in. And oh, by the way, he's still a pretty good left tackle, and it's not easy to find left tackles in this league. And that's a position that's always paid a premium. So his contract, although he gets paid a lot of money, if you look at other high-level left tackles, I mean, that's the cost of doing business at that particular position. So you put that all into the equation. The last part is Jordan Mailata is not ready. If anybody thinks he's going to be the left tackle next season, that's not going to happen. He's a very raw player. They thought him as a 3-year project to begin with. So he'll need at least another year. And that means you're talking about sort of a piecemeal approach to potentially get to Jordan Mailata down the road. And is that better than Jason Peters? I'm not sure. So I think if he wants to play, I think he's got enough standing in this organization that the Eagles will look for ways to bring him back. And we know, and you mentioned, Mike, salary cap people can talk about it all they want. Howie Roseman has proven time and time and time again, if this organization wants a player, they will find a way to keep him.
John, big question for you here. I think a lot of people out there want to know. 2 o'clock Saturday comes around. Will you be watching TNT broadcasting Salt Lake at Birmingham as week 2 of the AAF officially kicks off?
Well, that's a better question to ask of my wife. But if I have free time,
well, tell her that this is work here.
Sadly, I would.
You're finding the next practice squad player for the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah, I would certainly flip back and forth. That would be in play if I'm watching television. I'm not going to say I'm going to sit there and watch all 3 hours of it, but hey,
it's only 2.5 hours. That's what's great about this.
Well, that's true. They speed it up. It's football. It's on. That would be in the rotation of flipping channels. By
the way, you got to get for Saturday night, John, UFC Fight Pass. I have the call with CM Punk on CFFC 72.
Yeah, I see that. That's your second one, right?
Number 2. They brought me back.
So that's a positive sign. That means you're doing a good job. Say hi to CM Punk later. Big fan.
Yep, he will be on with us tonight, 5:30, I think. Now, we agreed to 5:30. Now, he texted me that his flight was delayed, so we'll see. But hopefully 5:30 tonight. We're meeting tomorrow. We got a little production meeting and all that good jazz, and then fight Saturday night. So there you go. No AAF football. UFC Fight Pass is where you can see the fight.
Fight Pass, that's 2 o'clock we're talking about.
Yeah.
Well, there's got to be a primetime game.
Well, okay, well, you can watch the 2 o'clock game.
Okay.
And that means we're just a couple cage fights away from Mike Gill being the lead voice of the UFC. That's how I'm
no, I think Anik's safe, believe me. He's pretty darn good. But Punk might be moved. I don't know how many more fights I'm going to get with Punk, I can tell you that much.
Is he tired of you already?
No, he likes me, but he's pretty darn good. He's really good.
and he's got a big name. So,
right. Believe me, there's a reason why he's doing what he's doing right now. They're going to snatch him away from me pretty quickly.
Yeah, I would imagine. That's the first thought when I saw him doing that, starting to do fights and do the color on fights, was ultimately UFC's probably grooming him because he's got such a big name.
Yeah, and he's pretty good, by the way. He does a really good job. He knows what he's talking about. He studies. He works with these guys. He works out with these guys still. So he is entertaining to listen to do the fights, but he's very knowledgeable as well. So, by the way, Adam Silver
on the stick, as they say.
Yes, he was he cut a good promo, pipe bomb. By the way, Adam Silver, your next NFL commish.
No, I don't think so. I don't put much stock into that. Remember, Roger Goodell just signed a 5-year extension in December of 2017. So they're going to pay him $200 million. So I don't think they're looking for another commissioner.
I take that deal. $200 million, I'm in. All right. John McMullen on the NFL every day, this time on the Boardwalk on the Hotline. Thanks, pal.
All right. Thanks, guys.